Hi, my name is Denise Thompson, and today I'm going to be going through a pre-assessment technique for my lesson plan on learning literary devices through children's storybooks. I'm going to be going through a presentation of the pre-assessment since I am currently on spring break and unable to record myself in front of my classroom. Also, I have already taught this unit and it went well. So I just thought I would go through in PowerPoint format the steps I did and share that with you. So let me pull up the PowerPoint and we'll get started. So as I said, this is learning literary devices through children's storybooks. The lesson is actually based on this reference text by Susan Hall. It's called Using Picture Storybooks to Teach Literary Devices. And it isn't an instructional so much as it is just a list of different children's texts that actually contain literary devices. This is a really neat lesson because it makes the subject text, it's very simple for students to grasp. So any student really at any reading level should be able to at least grasp the meaning of these stories. So how do I determine prior knowledge? Well, there's certain things that I expect the students to know starting the lesson. I should let you know that this is being taught to an 11th grade class. So the students should have some knowledge, some basic knowledge coming in. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in 11th grade. So first, students will need to understand the basic story arc. So that means like how, beginning, middle, and end, as well as standard elements of fiction such as central characters, conflict resolution, etc. Next, students need to understand that literature should not always be accepted at face value, and most often literary works contain dual meanings. So many of these dual meanings are explored or revealed through the use of literary devices. Next, students should be familiar with the terms literary devices and figurative language. Both of these terms would have been used in the class prior to the start of the current unit. And hopefully they would have been used throughout their high school career up until this point. And then finally, students should be familiar with some of the more common literary devices, such as simile, metaphor, pun. Again, students should simply be familiar with these words. There are no expectations that they understand the definitions of these words or how they are used in literature. So the pre-assessment would typically start with a bell ringer. I'd write this set of questions up on the board for the first 5 minutes in class. So we all know what literary devices are, hopefully some type of knowledge. But why are they important? Are literary devices used in other places other than literature? And where? How are literary devices useful in better understanding the things we see, read, and watch? This gets students thinking about where do they see puns? Do they just see them in literature, even though it's a literary device? Or do they know jokes that are considered puns? It makes them think about metaphors and symbols and things like when they're watching movies, like Lord of the Rings. The ring was symbolic for something much larger. So this hopefully gets students thinking. Next, this actually rolls into a think, write, pair, share. So students are given time to write their responses down, and then they'll pair with their elbow partner or somebody behind them, just so that they're in groups of two. Then the student pairs are given about 3 minutes to discuss their ideas. So this is an opportunity for them to talk about their ideas, to flesh them out, to give them more meaning, to learn from one another. And then I will call on them randomly to share out their ideas to the class. Then this type of share out hopefully will lead to some type of unstructured discussion and free recall. So the unstructured discussion allows students to as McKenna and Robinson in their text say, explore their own experiences as they relate to the topic. They'll think of movies they've seen, they'll think of other books they've seen, they'll think of commercials, they'll think of jokes, like I said before. Unstructured discussions organically incorporate another method that can be used to determine prior knowledge, and that's free recall. So during whole class or group discussions, students brainstorm, saying anything they suspect a treatment of the topic might contain. Now, while the free recall and the unstructured discussion and the think, write, pair, share activities all give you, a general assessment of where different students are at, it doesn't really give you any tangible data. So from there, I would give them literally a pre-assessment, which would be something like this document here. So basically, I could do something like a multiple choice, I could do a matching, I could do a true or false. The options here are kind of limited, or not limited, limitless. I could even ask them to give short responses. I could provide them the entire list of literary devices that we will be covering in the unit. For this particular unit, there are 42 of them, which are a lot. But I could start out with maybe 20 of them, half of them, ones that I think that they should know, and maybe throw in a few that I'm pretty sure they don't know. So this will give me some tangible statistics. Where exactly do all of my students stand? And it allows me to adjust my lesson accordingly. So if every class member knows what a metaphor is, for example, defining and exampling that device is not a priority for this lesson now. So I can take out metaphor because I'm confident that my students know it. It should be noted that this pretest actually speaks to the very core of the lesson, so it's recognizing and utilizing literary devices properly. So even though this could be considered content knowledge, it's not a knowledge that should be expected of students prior to starting the lesson. The pretest is simply going to set a baseline from which the students and I can work. Okay. Now, how will I use this data? So using my pre-assessment data to enhance student knowledge. So once my prior content knowledge is determined, it might be necessary to teach or reteach or review certain elements in order to ensure that all students begin the unit at the same base knowledge. And this is really important because even though, the top 1/3 of the class will be starting, or they're a little ahead of the curve, and then you've got your middle 1/3, which, are starting right in the middle, then you've got your lower 1/3. I try to make sure everybody's starting with the same baseline, so that we all have the same base knowledge to work on. So, it might benefit the class to discuss the standard story arc as well as the most fundamental elements of fiction. Students, for example, could engage in a writing activity in which they identify the different story elements, the importance they play in building the story. Additionally, it would be appropriate to discuss familiar stories that students understand carry dual meanings and to discuss how those dual meanings exist. And then with the stories that have dual meanings, that's where the literary devices might come into play. The class should not feel limited to discussing written text. This will really help visual and oral learners because as literary devices are, they're evident in film, television, commercials, and by studying visual text, teachers are meeting the needs of visual and auditory learners. And you can use, commercials they see every day, films they know, television shows that they watch. And then accommodations for this particular unit or the pre-assessment or post-assessment or whatever, during the lesson it is important to consider the needs of ELLs and those that require special accommodations. So I think teachers should feel free to include multilingual texts. A lot of common children's storybooks are in Spanish or another language that might be prominent at the school. Also, students can be strategically paired so that, a higher performing student is paired with a lower performing student. And then also, again, teachers should definitely include multimedia text because, commercials, movies, advertisements, print advertisements, storybooks, short stories, poems, all of these things, any type of text you choose are bound to include multimedia or excuse me, are bound to include literary devices. So, um, this is what I would do to, to pre-assess my students. Okay, so thank you.